North and South Korea are taking a step towards a new era of peace. The two have signed a military agreement, and they've also pledged to remove all threats that could cause war in the region. The leaders of the two Koreas, Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in of South Korea, sealed the peace deal after the second round of talks in Pyongyang. North Korea has agreed to dismantle key missile facilities. Denuclearization efforts would include the permanent closure of test launch pads.
Today, I present Moon made another milestone on the way for development in North-South Korea relations and peace. I sincerely appreciate President Moon's passion and effort who visited Pyongyang for this valuable progress today.
With Chairman Kim, we agreed on detailed measures to completely remove fear of war and risk of military conflicts. Also, we promised to pass next generation a beautiful land with nuclear weapon or three, from Baekdu to Anra. Before it's too late, we take measures to resolve pain of separated family fundamentally. I gratefully applaud for your leader, Chairman Kim, who is walking this big journey towards new future together with me.
Kim Jong-un offered a farewell dinner to South Korean President Moon Jae-in. With this, the two Korean leaders have closed the two-day summit. Our correspondent in Beijing, Isaura Diaz, brings us the latest on this inter-Korean summit.
The official meetings between Moon Jae-in, President of South Korea, and leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong-un, have finished during the Inter-Korean Summit. It is only anticipated that Moon Jae-in will travel to a nearby territory to the border between North Korea and China before returning to South Korea. One of the more impactful developments was the September Declaration, an agreement signed between Kim and Moon, which lays out steps towards the denuclearization and to end once and for all with the threats of war on the peninsula. At a press conference, the president of South Korea, Moon Jae-in, declares that North Korea is committed to permanently close a test installation of missile engines with the presence of international experts. It's no secret to anyone that Kim Jong-un has reiterated on several occasions the country's commitment to denuclearization. With this, President Moon Jae-in ratified that he trusts that the relationship between North Korea and the United States will draw increasingly closer. This was one of the objectives of the President of South Korea, bringing North Korea closer to Washington. It's important to note that Kim Jong-un said that by year's end, he could be the first president of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to visit their southern neighbors, the Republic of Korea.
That was Isaura Diaz from China. And Chinese medical teams are working alongside doctors in countries across Africa to boost healthcare in the continent. Within the framework of China-Africa Medical Cooperation, the teams have set up the China-Zambia Endoscopy Center, where local patients can receive free diagnosis and treatment. Medics hope the minimally invasive technology could be popularized in Zambia so more patients can benefit from it.
Based on their needs, we set up a team in the Emergency and Trauma Center, a team in the Cardiology Intervention Center, an Endoscopy Center, and we can also do some minimally invasive operation to help Zambian doctors improve their skills and relieve the patients from pains.
Service to the vulnerable communities for absolutely free. All the surgeries, all the interventions that they are doing are at no cost to the patients. And they are not only in Lusaka, but they are in other remote places like the southern province of Zambia. And I will tell you that they have done amazing operations. They have saved lives where we thought things were impossible.
Zambian President Edgar Lungu has fired a cabinet minister in charge of social and welfare funds, Emerine Kabanshi. She was laid off after Britain and Finland froze aid over suspicions that more than $4 million of aid may have been misappropriated. The minister is accused of using funds meant for payments to vulnerable households to refurbish her office. The president has further ordered the investigative wings to probe these allegations. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has hailed the election of Singiswa Losi as President of the Congress of South African Trade Unions. President Ramaphosa described Losi's election as a step forward and a victory for women, especially black women. Losi was elected unopposed. Delegates at the COSATU Congress also welcomed her election.
We must bring in young women into the workplaces, not only those traditional workplaces that were known to be women workplaces. We must have women engineers. It must be our campaign to push for women engineers, just like we've pushed for women leadership. We are still having challenges, hence the economy and our productivity is affected as a country. And we really want the ANC government to work with us as labour movement to invest more in the reskilling of workers and also introducing new workers into workplaces.
Eritrea has arrested a former minister, Berhane Abrehe, who had authored a number of books which are critical of the country's current leader. The British-based organization Human Rights Concern Eritrea said that Berhane Abrehe was arrested on Monday during the morning in the capital Asmara. Abrehe held the office of finance minister from 2000 to 2012. Eritrea's government said that the former minister accused the president of being responsible for the suffering of the Eritrean people. In Zimbabwe, President Emerson Mnangagwa has ruled out a return to the local dollar, at least until economic fundamentals have been corrected. He says that the multiple currency regime introduced in 2009 will remain in place. The government will now institute measures to stabilize the macroeconomic environment, reduce budget deficit, and grow the economy.
I think that one of the biggest challenges that industry has been facing in our country has been the lack of credit lines, the lack of international financial support in terms of their business activities. So any international line of credit will assist revive industries here, assist businesses here be able to do international trade, and I think this is a very important aspect that His Excellency mentioned.
In a sense, the fiscal side is also an albatross on the monetary side. So if we're going to have monetary sector reforms, also reforms on the fiscal side, for which I mean is reduce the budget deficit, get it down to single digit as quickly as we can, and also adopt a budgeting approach that always take a medium-term approach. So we must be clear where we want to be in 3 years' time in terms of our fiscal balances, but also controlling expenditure and making sure that on the revenue side we broaden the tax base.
The Electoral Commission of the Democratic Republic of Congo has published its official list of candidates for December's presidential elections. While the lineup gives the green light to 2 opposition candidates, it excludes 2 heavyweight contenders such as Jean-Pierre Bemba and Moise Katumbi. There have been several bloody protests during the tenure of current President Joseph Kabila. Voting day is scheduled for December 23rd.
The plenary assembly of the SEMI makes public the final list of the 21 presidential candidates of the Republic.
We are entering the final stretch around December 23, 2018, the day of the election. This is an important day in the history of our country.
Coming up, more stories. We'll be back. Welcome back. Peru's Congress has approved a confidence vote proposed by President Martín Vizcarra in an attempt to pressure Congress into giving a green light for a referendum. The 82-22 vote in favor of Vizcarra now forces Congress to pass his judicial and political reforms. The vote marks a stunning victory over the even more conservative opposition party, which controls the legislature and which was under enormous pressure to comply. The proposal will be submitted to a referendum on December 9th.
These reforms are so important for changing the country. for making it respectable, for making it transparent and competitive, to make it viable for our children.
But if he wants to look to the people for legitimacy, why not ask the people if he stays or goes, if it shortens or not the presidential term? And if not, we'll all go with him.
If Vizcarra doesn't get the support he wants for his anti-corruption measures, he says he could dissolve Congress, although he said he doesn't want to. Now to Colombia, where the National Liberation Army says they have released another person who they held captive. On Twitter, the ELN said it has handed over a young woman, Mayerly Cortez, to the authorities. It said that once again the government's peace commissioner had put obstacles, but that the guerrillas had done their duty. President Iván Duque has demanded the release of all ELN captives as a condition for restarting peace talks. Thousands of Argentinians have taken to the streets once again, this time to protest against hike in energy prices. They marched to the Energy Ministry to demand lower service cuts. In June, Argentina signed a $50 billion deal with the International Monetary Fund, but the deal was not enough to halt the run on the peso, which slid 26% in August alone.
The blow it unleashes on Argentine families is tremendous. Bills that are impossible to pay for a working man or woman. The government can't continue to levy such brutal hits on the daily lives of Argentines.
If it is hard for us working people who have jobs to pay, imagine how it is for a worker who is out of work.
And Argentina's indigenous leader, Milagros Sala, has announced she wants to run for governor in the province of Jujuy. In a radio interview, Sala said she's preparing her campaign. The activist is currently under house arrest, facing charges in different cases. Supporters say Sala is the victim of political persecution for her work as a social activist. Former Spanish Prime Minister José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero could mediate a dialogue between the government in Venezuela and the opposition. Rodríguez Zapatero has arrived in Caracas to push for new talks. President Nicolás Maduro confirmed on Tuesday that his government is willing to sit down with the opposition. The former Spanish Prime Minister has been a central figure in several attempts to reach an agreement with Venezuela's opposition. Now to Brazil, where the presidential campaign continues, and Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad has jumped to a second place, according to recent polls. Let's hear from our correspondent, André Vieira, in Rio, for more on this election.
Fernando Haddad, the presidential candidate for the Workers' Party, has consolidated second place in the latest polls. The Ibope Institute shows that Haddad has jumped 11% to reach the second place and holds now 19% of the voting intention. In the first position, the candidate of the far right, Jair Bolsonaro, with 28%, and the center candidate, Ciro Gomes, has 11%. The biggest challenge for the Fernando Haddad is to gather all the votes from Lula da Silva, who lead all the polls for the new candidates Haddad, and his vice-presidential candidate Manuela Dávila from Brazil's Communist Party. There are less than 20 days to go until the elections. Haddad is now on a countrywide campaign to tell all Brazilians that he is supported by Lula, by Dilma Rousseff and the progressive movement in the country. He will continue campaigning in the state of Sao Paulo, one of the largest and with the highest amount of votes.
And a group of women are mobilizing against Brazil's right-wing candidate Jair Bolsonaro on social media. The Facebook group Women United Against Bolsonaro has garnered nearly 2 million members in just a few days. They say Bolsonaro is against women's rights. They have called for a protest on September 29, a week before the presidential elections.
He represents a policy that goes against all the rights we have won throughout history and has been in the limelight, especially in recent times. Women's movements are the ones who have fought the most against injustice, unemployment. We women have the worst social statistics. Our sons are dying because of violence, trafficking, and corruption.
In Ecuador, the hearing in the case of the alleged kidnapping of politician Fernando Balda has been suspended. Attorneys have accused former President Rafael Correa of having links to it, which Correa denies and denounces it as persecution.
Judge Daniela Camacho has suspended the pre-trial hearing against former President Rafael Correa. Attorney General Paul Perez, who is one of the complainants, was supposed to have presented the evidence in the Balda case, but he didn't. It led to some charges being dropped, but the hearing continues on Friday.
I applaud the objectivity of the office prosecutors when it decided to withdraw the charges against Mr. Jorge Espinosa and Fausto Tamayo.
The prosecutor's office says there were errors in the files. Fernando Balda's legal team says they want the process to be clean and fair.
It's a matter of effectiveness. We have not read the opinion, but we must consider, after we do a thorough examination of everything we have, verified that so far there are no grounds to accuse them both.
Meanwhile, Correa's legal team questioned prosecutors' actions. They say there are possible conflicts of interest which require the suspension of the hearing.
The opinion has to be presented in advance. It seems to me that they are trying to surprise us. The only thing we can see from this is the weakness and insecurity of an accusing body, which has no basis to carry forward this accusation. This is what happens when there is no reason to continue with the process.
Several international observers have attended the hearing. They were invited by former President Correa. He described the suspension as a shame. On Twitter, President Rafael Correa also condemned this ruling as a public embarrassment. Denise Herrera, del Sur, Ecuador.
We'll take one last short break, but stay with us. Thanks for joining us again. The governor of the Central Bank of Barbados has announced a restructuring of the country's domestic debt. Economists say it could mean that people will lose money as they will get less returns on their investments in the form of government bonds. The government said earlier there was no other alternative to tackle the country's massive debt. The move is part of a deal signed with the International Monetary Fund.
You will see for these structures that are being offered that they're being amortized, I think in most cases quarterly. So it means that every quarter a little bit of that bond, so it was 100,000, but in the first quarter you might be getting, let's say, $1,000, the next quarter another 1,000. So you're being repaid gradually, but as you're being repaid, that also helps to reduce the stock of debt.
Our correspondent from Bridgetown, Kareem Smith, joined us earlier with the details.
Of course, government's current debt, which has risen to 157% of GDP, is simply too large at this point. We also know that the previous government was engaging in the dangerous practice of borrowing money from the central bank to meet its local obligations, also known as printing money, particularly to pay the salaries of the country's large public sector, which currently provides important services like healthcare and education up to the tertiary level. Of course, it's expected government under the current International Monetary Fund program will be looking to reduce its wage bill and perhaps explore the option of privatization to ensure a crisis of this nature, an economic crisis of this nature, doesn't happening again. I was also speaking to a local economist, Jeremy Stevens, who reminded me that Barbados is the third most indebted country in the world on a per capita scale, leaving the new Mia Mottley-led government to make somewhat unfavorable decisions which will invariably affect the average person on the street.
That was Karine Smith from Bridgetown. The leaders of Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana have signed a memorandum of understanding on oil and other issues. The MOU also includes cooperation in agriculture and security. The move comes as Guyana is in the midst of rapidly expanding its oil and gas sectors. The private sector has been on alert over Trinidad's involvement in Guyana's energy sector.
So for both of us, it's a win-win situation. And I would say for the Caribbean community as well, this is a significant step in making the Caribbean community stronger. Thank you.
What today represents is a documentation of our commitment to do more in our neighborly relations with respect to the generation of economic and other kinds of activities for the benefit of the people of Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago.
St. Kitts and Nevis has been celebrating the 35th anniversary of its independence from Great Britain. The Caribbean island gained independence from Britain in 1983. The islands were the first site of British colonial settlers in the Caribbean in the 17th century. The day is celebrated with festivals all over the island and a speech by the Prime Minister. Mexican rescue workers have attended a religious ceremony to mark the anniversary of two deadly earthquakes. One devastated the country 1 year ago, claiming 369 lives. The second one in 1985 killed more than 10,000 people. Rescuers say the country needs to be better prepared for these tragedies.
As we were hit again, the new generation realized that it is not a joke, that we need to be prepared, and we must get closer to the civil protection.
Employees of the fast food giant McDonald's in the United States are on strike to protest against sexual harassment. Demonstrations are taking place in Kansas City and in Chicago. They're demanding that management take stronger action against sexual harassment in their workplace.
No single worker in any industry in the last century has gone on strike for sexual harassment. So today, fast food workers, just like me, are breaking the silence. We're taking this historic step, and we're going on strike to tell McDonald's, no more sexual harassment.
Legal experts are expressing divergent views on the discussion of Cuba's new constitution, which could pave the way for same-sex marriage. Our correspondent in Havana, Laura Prada, tells us more.
He is one of the sociologists who wrote the booklet Deconstructing Myths About Same-Sex Couples, a useful text that feeds into the debate taking place in Cuba over proposed constitutional reform, in particular the modification of Article 68, which would allow same-sex marriage.
This booklet was collectively created based on a debate we knew Cuban society would engage in. After learning that Article 68 of the Constitution will be altered, well, the preliminary draft for constitutional change proposes a new definition for marriage.
Experts agree that Article 68, which redefines marriage as the consensual and voluntary union between two people, is closely related to Article 40, which extends the rights of the people.
In this, we ensure people will have equal rights from birth. We would not fulfill the principle of equality if we fail to accept that not only are we equal in terms of gender, skin color, and religion, but also in terms of sexual orientation.
Pero no de orientación sexual. Entonces, es muy importante que aparezca en la Constitución.
No discrimination because of sexual orientation or gender identity is now embodied in the new draft constitution.
Porque precisamente en el texto actual se prohíben
Our right to express our sexual orientation, even our gender identity, is something essential to our dignity as human beings. But the wider interpretation as it relates to the principle of equality is that it was already included in this section that they intend to modify. Article 68 is very much in line with this principle. It introduces a reconfiguration of the constitutional definition of marriage in our country. Right now, this is regulated according to Article 76. Currently, this article definitely restricts the rights of a certain group of people who do not have the right to access this legal institution.
On November the 15th, the Cuban people will end their debates on the constitutional reform, a project that promises a more inclusive society.
And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and many other stories, as you know, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. Here you can find all the latest information, our opinion articles, our latest videos. You can search through countries and through topics and stay updated with all the information we have to show you. And be sure to also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
We are present